Hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I am Kathryn, and we are here with yet another emergency episode because we have big surprise news of Max Verstappen is staying right where he is. So is this entirely a surprise? No. Is it still actually a pretty major surprise? Also, yes. So before we dive in, don't forget to make sure that you have subscribed and hit the bell for notifications so I can continue inflicting my motorsport opinions upon the greater population. And if you're listening to this podcast episode on your preferred podcast platform, please don't forget to leave me a 5-star review. Now, I don't know what you were doing at, let's call it midnight Pacific time, but I was scrolling through Instagram while dealing with 2 feline temper tantrums when I saw a very interesting video put out by the Red Bull account, of which I was very confused about the video and Laurent Mekies sending an email about Max resigning, which just felt really kind of weird. And then they did the resigned, re-signed pun, which, let's be real, that was hilarious. But the news is that there is news. Max Verstappen is extending his contract with Red Bull, which we all know was originally ending in 2028, because that's literally the only thing we have ever talked about regarding Max in the last year. Now the new end date is in 2030, and this looks to be I wouldn't necessarily say this is going to be the last contract that Max is going to be signing in Formula One, but he has implied in recent comments. They had a massive press conference at media availability today in Zandvoort that he does want to end his career here at Red Bull, and 2030 might be the time. He's also confirmed that he was definitely a little closer to hanging it up and retiring than he was to move to another team, which, are we surprised in any way about that? Not particularly. Obviously, the 2026 season has not been the best first half of a season so far for Red Bull, but they did look a lot better towards the end of this first half going into the summer break. So it looks to be an optimistic second half of the season, but we'll see about that once we get to actual racing starting tomorrow. And most importantly, we don't have to keep talking about where Max is going to be driving in the future for at least another 1 to 2 years. Like, it is confirmed Max is staying at Red Bull. Obviously, the contract doesn't end until 2030, but as we know, Max's initial contract, like we've been saying, was scheduled to end in 2028. And there's still all of this talk of, oh, where is Max going to be going? And is Max going to be staying through with Red Bull? So I think it's safe to say, maybe probably, that Max will be staying at Red Bull through at least 2028 now. So maybe we can worry about where he's going to be in 2029 and 2030, like maybe the second half of the 2028 season, to just give us all a break about all of this. But like I said, it looks like he does want to end his career at Red Bull. That really has been what he has been saying. And he really doesn't care about what the media says when they're talking about him and what his plans are as a driver and through his career. It just is exhausting for all of us to have to listen to it every 10 minutes. And there was also confirmation that there were negotiations between his management team and McLaren, which I think would have been a truly terrible career move, but was a good professional move in a negotiation tactic for Red Bull to come to the table to want to actually keep him at Red Bull and not leave to go to Papaya Land, which, like I said, would honestly be a terrible career move. Kind of like when Danny Ricciardo left Red Bull and meandered to Renault and then got asked to leave by McLaren so that they can make room for Oscar Piastri. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. And among other things, Red Bull is Team Max Verstappen. Max has been with Red Bull since the 2016 season. It has been 10 years since he made the move. If we all remember that one time Sebastian Vettel basically told Christian Horner to fire Daniel Kvyat or demote him back to Toro Rosso, and that led to Max Verstappen being promoted from Toro Rosso to Red Bull, and then he got his first win at the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix. We've only talked about that a little bit on this podcast, and I've only referenced it about 1,000,000 times, but we had the spring break sprint episode about Sebastian Vettel and his pull at Red Bull, even though he had moved to Ferrari. And we have the Kathryn Watch Every Race of the 2016 season, so you don't have to. All of those are linked down in the show notes. But this is also going to put Max in a very interesting position, as he will, if he makes it to the end of the 2030 season, he will be 3 years past the current record for longest tenure with a single team, which is currently held by Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes with 12 years. So this will bring Max to 15 years total with Red Bull, which is a really long time to be a team. But also, this this does give Max a little bit more of a runway with Red Bull now to make it to another world championship or another couple world championships before he decides to hang it up. And now we all know that Max has said a million times that he is not looking to break the record of most world championships by a single driver. Currently, that record is 7, held by Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher. Max is not going for 8 championships, but it would be nice to see Max win a couple more. Obviously, he got very close last year, and we don't have to talk about the 2025 season in McLaren because it makes me upset, among other things. But this will give Max the entirety of this regulation to build these championship seasons with Red Bull, as opposed to departing halfway through a regulation. And we all know that the cars are their best going into the end of a regulation. So we're talking 2029. So this is going to give Max a lot more time to build this race winning car with the team that they have at Red Bull. Also, Red Bull lets Max do whatever the heck he wants outside of racing in F1. So all the sim racing he does, all of the endurance racing that he wants to do, that is something that Max would never be able to do at another team. Mercedes has already confirmed that Kimi Antonelli, who does want to do things like endurance racing, will not be able to do that while he is under contract with Mercedes. So this is a really unique position that Max is in at Red Bull, where they know what he likes, they know what he wants, they're building the car to his specifications, and it is basically they just have to figure out a second driver who will drive with him, which it looks positive in the direction of Isaac Hadjar, barring the whole wrist issue, which as an aside, it looks like Hadjar will be present at Zandvoort. So clearly the wrist issue is hopefully not as big as the Danny Ricciardo Zandvoort wrist issue from a couple of years back, but this is going to give Max the opportunity to continue consolidating the team around him, which may not be beneficial for Red Bull in the long run after Max retires, but that is a future Red Bull problem, not a current Red Bull problem. So it's basically, let's continue doing what we're doing, and they will continue going through second drivers like tissue paper, or maybe Isaac Hadjar will just be the good second driver that we all had hoped Sergio Perez would have been on a long-term basis, because obviously Sergio Perez did have a couple of good years at Red Bull before everything went to not so good. But anyway, we'll see. And there has been a question of Max's tenure with Red Bull in regards to all of the high profile departures since the beginning of his time at Red Bull in 2016. Obviously, Christian Horner is gone. Obviously, Helmut Marko is gone. Adrian Newey is gone. GP is going to McLaren. So obviously, there was a question of, is Max going to follow his race engineer? Which, remember, GP, as we talked about in the episode I did, the other breaking news episode I did about GP leaving Red Bull in 2028, at the end of 2027, you know what I mean, is GP was not going to be Max's race engineer. And clearly Max's decision to stay 3 years past GP leaving means that the race engineer relationship is not one of the critical factors that is keeping him from looking at other opportunities. Plus, it just wouldn't have worked at McLaren, who's obviously he's going to replace Oscar Piastri if he would have gone. But then you still have the situation where Lando Norris is the McLaren golden boy. Lando Norris is going to be staying at McLaren long term and will also probably end his career as a one constructor driver, which we know Max is what started at Toro Rosso, and so it doesn't technically count, but we all know it's basically all just Red Bull. But there's no way that a Max Verstappen Lando Norris partnership works out positively in the long run. And you're going to have Max come in, and Max is going to be the number one driver wherever he goes. Lando's not going to be happy about that. And don't get me with this, we don't have a number one driver in Papaya Land, which they totally do, and we totally know it's not Oscar Piastri. So it just wouldn't have worked. But like I said, it's a good negotiation tactic. And this is going to bring in a lot of optimism for the continued stability of Red Bull. Obviously, Max has been the cornerstone of the team. So let's see how this optimism is going to translate from, yay, we have our driver, to yay, we have our car. And the other part of the car situation is, yes, we are in a new regulation, but we're also in a new engine manufacturer at Red Bull. They are now Red Bull powertrains with Ford, which is a whole other major challenge that Red Bull has been handling a lot better than, say, Aston Martin moving to a new engine manufacturer between last year and this year. Last year they were with Mercedes, this year they were with Honda. Red Bull went from Honda, technically it was their own, but it was basically Honda, and now they're a Red Bull Ford powertrains manufacturer team. And so to have this brand new engine, this brand new regulation, all of these things that Red Bull has handled a lot better than, say, Aston Martin. These are all reasons for optimism going into the back half of this season, where Max may not be going after Kimi Antonelli for the championship, but this could be a charge further up the constructor standings, which also is critical as the teams go through this regulation. And I think that the key here is that Max is going to be staying with Red Bull for the duration of this regulation, and then Red Bull will figure out what they're going to have in the future and what other next Max Verstappen they're going to sign, which could be Nikola Kozlov, who's currently in F2, and if so, he might be a little early for this, but there's still a lot of optimism with Red Bull. As a Red Bull fan, I am happy to see this. This means that I'm going to have Max Verstappen as my Red Bull driver optimistically until 2030. Where I will be insert age here years old. But I think that this is a really good signing. This is not anything that I expected to be talking about today or this week or this season. But hey, it works. Anyway, what do you think about Max deciding to extend for another 4 years, or it's technically, we know it's 2 years. Like, yes, it's 4 years, but it's 2 years. So what do you think about Max extending to 2030? Were you as confused as I was when they made this announcement, or was it just because I am tired and dealing with a pair of feline temper tantrums? Yes, I have a second cat in my life now. It's a long story we're not going to be going into on the podcast. But anyway, that's what I've got. Up next will be an episode. It will either be F1 related or it will be F1 Academy related. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss whichever episode it is. And we have racing to watch finally. So thanks for going off track with me, and I will see you in the next one.